The first time I met Renee, she led me to the delicatessens walk-in and showed me the corned beef. It was 6 a.m, and I was in that first day of work hell state, the one where everything seems impossible, especially when the sun isn't up yet, and all you want to do is turn around and run back to wherever it is that you came from. But 5 minutes into our acquaintance, I understood that I wasn't going anywhere. I was going to do whatever Renee told me to do, and at that moment, she was telling me to take a 120-pound vat full of brine and raw meat, wrestle it to the kitchen, and discharge its contents into a very large pot of boiling water. I don't remember how I did it. The vat weighed more than I did, and I lacked any discernible upper body strength. What I do remember is that I didn't want to disappoint Renee, and that I would do literally anything I had to in order to avoid that. Because Renee was my boss and an authority figure who could fire my ass, but also she was different from the vast majority of the authority figures I had known. Those figures were men who kicked up enough hot air and testosterone to obscure their varying degrees of insecurity. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. So I knew what it looked like when a man wanted you to feel like you didn't know anything and use that to fluff up his sense of power. Coincidentally, that happens to be my primary memory of my 7th grade band teacher. And I'd been conditioned to believe that only men were tough enough to do dirty work, the kind that women supposedly didn't do, at least not where I grew up, which was a comfortable Midwestern university town. Until I began working at the deli, my most enduring examples of women in the kitchen were moms. They were tough in the way that most moms have to be tough, but they weren't Renee tough. They baked things and hosted things and didn't have visible tattoos or biceps. They swam with my mother and gossiped in the gym sauna later. They were faculty wives who formed committees and carpools. They went into the kitchen with the express purpose of feeding us so that we would grow up and grow strong. They made casseroles and brownies and Nestle Toll House cookies and placed orders for Baskin-Robbins ice cream cakes. They wielded butter knives. None of which is a criticism. It's just to say that I had a very specific idea of what it meant to be a woman in the kitchen, which to me meant the home kitchen. Whenever I thought of professional kitchens, I thought of men who were paid to do in public what our mothers did for free in private. Where our mothers nurtured, the men performed expertise. So a woman who performed that kind of expertise, particularly in a place that was crawling with men, was still a relative novelty to me. And Renee was not only an expert, she was also the kind of boss who didn't need to raise her voice to get you to do what she wanted you to. She just looked at you. And suffice it to say, she terrified me. Renee was not, I should point out, the first tough woman I'd met at the delicatessen, which was and still is called Zingerman's. Yeah. 4 years earlier, at the age of 15, I was hired to work there as a baker under a woman named Ellie. Ellie was young, probably in her early 20s, but her self-possession and inability to take crap from anyone made her seem decades older. She was head of the pastry department, which at the time consisted of 4 women, 3 of whom were still in high school. Ellie was sort of a cross between a mom and a platoon leader. She had to be, because we were almost constantly fighting with the boys who shared our subterranean kitchen space. We fought over music. Because this was the 90s, we wanted the Pet Shop Boys, while they wanted the Butthole Surfers. We fought over our cookie dough, which they liked to steal with their bare hands. Most of all, we fought over who got to lay claim to that inadequate space. It was a fight that I was ill-equipped for. I was terribly, horribly, excruciatingly shy, particularly when fate conspired to put me in close proximity to boys. Yes, need I say more? If you want a more specific sketch of my awkwardness than that photo, consider this. When I had a crush on an older guy at the deli, if memory serves, his name was Leaf, and he made sandwiches. I left a note of admiration tucked in with his time card, signed not with my name, not with my phone number, but with my home street address. somewhat unexpectedly, he failed to materialize on my doorstep. Anyway, my fear of boys made Ellie all the more fascinating to me because she treated them exactly like that, boys. And boys, moreover, who are about as relevant and intimidating as fruit flies on a rotten banana. The difference between Ellie and Renee was that Ellie took care of us, whereas Renee left me to fend for myself, to stare into black holes of corned beef and feed greasy chicken livers into a meat grinder. Where Ellie was sunny and maternal, Renee was laconic and whatever the opposite of maternal is. This isn't to say she was mean, she just had a job to do. And so I put my head down and did my job, which was, so far as I was concerned, to avoid pissing off Renee, or for that matter, Kelly, the other woman in the kitchen. Kelly was somewhere between 28 and 55 and had a young son. I really don't know. Their plan, she once told me, was to get matching tattoos when he was old enough. And to this day, I really do wonder if they did. Both she and Renee called me college girl, which made me want to be tougher, and I learned to be, right up until the moment that Renee appeared with a cow's tongue and announced that I was going to learn how to peel it. I can still see that tongue sitting on the cutting board like some pilfered Damien Hirst installation. And I can still see myself deciding in that moment to become a vegetarian. But most of all, I can still hear Renee's voice, calmly and clinically instructing me as I began to understand that if this was what was required to be Renee tough, then I was going to have to recalibrate my expectations of my personal capacity for toughness. As it turned out, I didn't have to, because I quit to go back to school before my next tongue-peeling opportunity presented itself. I left feeling relieved, but I'd be lying if I said that I felt much more than that at the time. I just wanted to get out of the kitchen, away from the tongues and livers and heat, and go back to being who I was more comfortable being, which was a nerd at an all-women's college that served quinoa in the cafeteria. It took me years to understand the impact that the women I worked with had on me, and to realize that seeing women wield both real knives and expertise had given me a model of how I could be, both at work and in life. I saw that women could be tough in the way that men were, but also, more importantly, in the way that men weren't. And that real toughness often spoke quietly while looking you straight in the eye. I saw that I didn't have to be nice or meek to get what I wanted, or to be accommodating to someone who didn't deserve my accommodation. And perhaps most importantly, I saw that I didn't have to please men in order to feel like I'd accomplished something. I just had to tell them to stay the fuck away from my cookie dough. Thank you.